James.
I'm Gordon.
I'm Angel.
And we're doing our presentation to the room of book producer executives here, the novelists, on Blue Hour, our story.
So Blue Hour will be a futuristic dystopian novel. We plan for it to just be one book and not a series. And our logline is, in the year 2500, life on Mars has been rebuilt after Earth has collapsed, and a new form of discrimination has arisen against those born as cold bloods, or people who have a mutation that keeps their blood at a colder temperature. Keegan, our main character, is an overly benevolent cold blood who is sent as a spy to gather intel for an upcoming revolt against those who have kept his people shunned away from society, yet finds himself making friends on the other side of the wall.
Okay, and digging into just the world itself right now, it takes place on the terraformed Mars, you said, where stuff has been done to the soil and atmosphere to make it more livable, but it's still really cold and snowy and icy. And the way that the civilization is spread out is it's made up of mainly these dense cities where warm bloods live with all their resources and stuff. While cold bloods who've been kicked out are kind of left to figure things out in the expanse beyond the cold wilderness out there. And anything else? Oh, there's the ice rail that goes between those dense cities where it's meant to be this is how the warm bloods can transport and trade between those locations. It's also used by the cold bloods to sneak around, but we'll get to that later. So that's the world.
And then next we have delving into the people themselves. So the way they went about terraforming was using people called reformers, which is people who were prisoners back on Earth, and prisoners just people that they selected and you're gonna terraform Mars for us before the Earth eventually collapsed. And during these early days, it became it gave rise to what we call the temperament scale, which is a play on words of someone's actual temperament, like something to do with anger or if they're more easygoing. But instead it switched to actual temperature, and basically they use that temperament scale to decide if someone's more easier to take care of, if taking care of them uses more or less resources. So someone with warmer blood would be more acceptable to their society as compared to someone with colder blood, who would be more suspect. How do you say it? Suspect. They would die in the cold. Water warfare is the thing.
Water warfare was an idea where the main form of combat is using water, since it's very cold on Mars. So they would mix certain materials together that would create a liquid similar to water that would freeze as soon as it comes into contact with another surface. So you could throw a bucket of water on someone and then they would freeze, and that would be the main type of combat in this world. So for the warm bloods, we wanted to make the distinction between them and the cold bloods very noticeable, and the main thing we decided to go with was wealth. So we see that with the kind of cities and settlements that each group has. So for the warm bloods, they have walled cities. Some of them are even domed for extra protection if they have the money and resources. Rich pods are sort of a smaller detail, not that important, but some of the richer people have their own pods that they live in that can be more heated than the rest. Militaries, the technology such as anti-freeze armor is also another contrasting point between the warm and cold bloods. And then why they discriminate, Angel kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's to do with how much heating someone takes to survive. So someone with warm blood doesn't need as much because their body temperature is already warm enough. And then cold bloods would need more of the heating in a city, which is they take up more resources than others, and that's looked down upon.
And again, back to cold bloods. To survive on Mars, they need to wear stuff more clothes. They again more resources that living on Mars can't really afford. So they end up getting kicked out of inner cities. Basically they're shown the door and they're like, go figure this out yourself because we're not going to be taking care of you. They have salt armor, which I think Gordon knows more about.
So salt armor was the idea with water warfare, where salt armor is like sort of an anti-freeze armor, but like more primitive, which kind of shows the wealth gap even more.
And then pole vaulting is basically like something that the cold bloods have picked up, which has both like a cultural significance but also like a combative advantage, especially to those the warm bloods who live in like walled cities, for example. So they're mostly used as like a combat strategy.
Yeah, like overall, like they don't have the resources the warm bloods have, so they're left to like figure out and make their own solutions from like the few resources they have. Okay, and some information on like the characters that we came up with is Keegan, Bermuda, and Esteban. Where Keegan is like, I think the main protagonist, and I know the main protagonist, what am I saying? And so Keegan is a cold blood who like later gets sent in as a spy. And he's like very like a people pleaser. Like he wants to like be very nice to people. He's working with the cold bloods currently to be sent as a spy. And then there's Bermuda, who's sending in Keegan as the spy, who's the like high-level cold blood revolution leader, who's like quite like a rough leader. Like they've kind of been forced to be harsh over time. They have quite tight rules or systems. It's like they know they need to keep things tight, to keep things moving within the resistance. And there's Esteban, who's like warm blood like general or leader of like the military in like a specific city that you'll see later on. And like he's more like downtrodden or like worn out by the years of like doing stuff, of like leading the warm blood military. And like secretly kind of feels bad for the cold bloods, which you'll see later on. That's a general overview of the characters.
Okay, so Act 1, we start with the scene on the ice rail, which, as mentioned earlier, is the transportation they use in this world, sort of like a train. And so through this ice rail, the audience will be introduced to the setting as Keegan, the main character, will be traveling along this ice rail, kind of seeing the different parts of society. And that's how we'll do the world building and introduce the main differences in the first act. And then he's traveling to Bermuda's speech. So he goes to the speech of the revolt leader. There he listens in on what she has to say. They already know each other, Keegan and Bermuda. So after the speech, Keegan goes up to Bermuda, and they talk about what the next steps are for the revolution. Bermuda decides to recruit Keegan to be a spy because she knows that he'll do well. And then after that, we have a scene where Keegan will be led to the armory. Now this armory isn't like extremely fancy because again the cold bloods are more poor, so more primitive technology. This is where we'll be introduced to some of the technology like the warm patches, which cold bloods can use to blend in, the salt armor, stuff like that. And then he'll be seated up there, and then we'll head to the zone or the city where Keegan will be spying into.
All right, in Act 2, like this is when Keegan, like, I don't know, probably pole vaults into that city, gets in, and like has to start pretending to be a warm blood to like become a guard and start getting info. So he puts on like the warm blood the warm patch things to like blend in, which like it allows him to like just appear as a warm blood, no need for extra coats or anything like that. And so I think the general plot becomes I think he takes the identity of a warm blood guard, like he just has the papers. It's like, yeah, I've been here the whole time, totally. And so he joins the military, like joins the warm blood guard, becomes like part of the guard, I guess, and attends a meeting. Like the first thing he does is attend this meeting where they look at the new supplies that they've got. They go to like the warm blood armory and they see all the tech that they've got of like the new anti-freeze armor that's been sent down. And so Keegan like takes that info, takes it to like the rail yard where you can like write the info on like a train car, hide it there, and then send it out for like info. And so I don't know, Keegan lives there for a while, like people pleasing and whatnot, and eventually becomes like Esteban's assistant over time, and of course learns that Esteban like feels bad for the Colbos. It's like if we had enough resources, we'd help them, but like we don't. And eventually, as time goes on, as Keegan gets like adjusted to the Warm Blood Society, like he starts to like get a little confused, or like he starts to like the Warm Bloods, like along with the Cold Bloods. Like they aren't that bad. I was like, if we had more resources, we'd all be chill. So it kind of starts to slack on sending the info out. And it's like, I'm not sure which side to support anymore. It's like both sides are like more in a situation of resource than a situation of like permanent hatred. And then like the revolt begins, and Keegan has to figure out what he's going to do or who he's going to support.
Yeah, so Act 2 will end with Keegan having to make that decision. Which side is he really on? And that's so for the reflection, one thing we wanted the audience to come away with was like there isn't like black and white usually in society. Like there's a lot of morally gray, like even friendships, loyalty, even like wealth gap. There isn't like a poor and a wealthy or a good and bad. Like morally gray areas of society and think like why people do what they do is like more complicated than some people think. And that's what we wanted to like have the audience take away from this.
I guess we're taking questions.
What side does he join?
You have to find out.
That's
to
part
find
of
out.
it.
Yeah,
You gotta find out.
Thank you, Tony.
Guys,
You said pole vaulting is really important, but I get why it's important to like break in, but what about like culturally?
I feel like war and tradition, like specifically like dancing, for example, or even like music. I feel like those two have a long history, not in just like this, but also like in real life. So I feel like that's mostly where the idea came from. I feel like they would use pole vaulting in like displays, for example, like just like performances, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like if pole vaulting is a thing like you use in a battle, it's like, hey, why don't we do this on our own time as well? Like that. You don't have much to do out there. It's very cold.
Is like the cold blood versus the warm blood supposed to be like an extended metaphor for like a specific thing, like classes in society or racism or something like that? Or is it more about just like two people against each other? Like, are you trying to like relate it to something specific in history or maybe a current event or just like?
I think because I remember, I think I was part of the discussion that mostly came up with that idea. I think it was trying to make some sort of commentary on both racism but also classism. So like homeless people, for example.
So are they the same species? One's warm, one's cold. I don't understand. How does that work?
They're all humans, yeah.
So
They're all humans, yeah.
But some are warm blooded, some are cold.
Yeah, the only difference is, like from our world, is that there's a mutation that has made some people's blood colder. But they're all humans, yes.
Wait.
Oh, why would you guys give the story an open ending? Because like she haven't choose which side you want to choose, right?
Yes.
What's the purpose?
Some of that is for leave it up to the publishers to kind of give their input first. But yeah, it makes it more exciting, I guess.
Does Mars have an atmosphere?
Yes, but very well in real life. Yes, it's very thin. So we've like the idea was that the reformers have terraformed Mars in a way that would make the atmosphere thicker and breathable.
I'm curious if you looked or like got inspired by any other stuff about Mars being terraformed, humans living on Mars, just like any research into that type of.
I think I made it all up.
Yeah, I don't think there's any research
love
into how
it.
you could terraform Mars.
I actually don't think I think the littlest of inspiration I had might have been Adventure Time. Whenever it comes to like the cities stuff,
Okay.
or even like Attack on Titan, or like, but I don't space stuff wise. I don't think I had any specific inspirations.
So just out of curiosity, and apologies if I missed this, but what kind of, I guess, structure or government system does Mars operate under? Because I don't know if I necessarily caught that.
We didn't say anything specifically about like government structure. I guess the idea was that the cities are very isolated from each other, so they kind of all operate under themselves and not under like one entity of government or country. So I guess that would be left up to each city how that would how the people would be governed. I guess.
So is it kind of like anarcho-capitalism in a sense? You have different capital classes, and there's not really a central body of government.
Right. Yeah.
So what are some cold blood traits he had to hide, and how did he hide them?
So one of the main differences that you can tell is like how much clothes a person has on, or like how many extra layers. So typically, like a cold blood would need more because they would need to stay warmer. So the way that our main character blended in was with warm patches, which would make like patches you can put on your skin that would emit heat. So you wouldn't need to wear as many clothes to be warm. That's an example.
How do they like decide if you're cold blooded? Is it just like if you're born with cold blood parents, you're automatically a cold blood, or is it something like they test you when you're born or something like that?
I think I remember we talked about this. I think it was partially like misguided like scientific testing, stuff like that. I think we mentioned identifiers or something like cards.
It was like an infrared maybe like system where you could like scan someone. But yeah, maybe some of the social aspect of like parents maybe early on in Mars.
So the warm blood militaries, do they use those against like the cold bloods or against other cities?
I mean, I guess cities could fight each other hypothetically, but like generally, like people are resource scarce. So yeah, I guess cities could fight each other.
So, So everybody aspires to be a warm blood. They want to go to the warm blood. What are the good things about being a cold blooded person? Anything?
I mean, you could probably say more sense of community. I mean, they're all in like the same thing together. But yeah, I guess like the desire to be warm isn't like physically warm, more like be socially accepted or have more wealth is like the main difference.
Sylvia, did you have your hand up?
Oh yeah. I was just thinking like if like what if like a person who's like warm but like their temperature is just like a little bit lower and then like they're just afraid of cold and they wear a lot.
I feel like that would be interesting to like dive into. I feel like that would also bring up a lot of like troubles for them, like the specific person that's dealing with that. They might get shunned, or like their parents might see them as like an embarrassment because like, oh, my kid has to wear more clothes.
Oh no, my legs.
All right, thank you so much.